When you think of Southeast Asia, vibrant cities, rich histories, and diverse cultures probably come to mind. It's a region that feels alive, a tourist dream, if you will. But you ever think about Timor-Leste? Probably not much, right? This small nation, rich in oil and gas, somehow ranks among Asia's poorest. The United Nations Human Development Index puts it at 155th over 193 countries. But how does that even happen? How can a country so resource-rich also be so economically broken at the same time? Well, being a petrostate doesn't mean wealth. For Timor-Leste, the wealth never stayed. In fact, it was siphoned off long ago before it could build a future. For Timor-Leste, it's been more of a curse than a blessing. Colonialism, invasions, and outright exploitation have systematically drained its potential. This isn't just about bad luck or poor management, it's more about its global system that thrives on keeping places like Timor-Leste vulnerable. To better understand this, we need to go back to the year 1515 AD. The 16th century was an era that demanded Europe to find trendy new stuff and exotic new places. One such place was the island of Timor, and the abundance of sandalwood. At the time, sandalwood was a coveted resource. There was a lot in India, which Portugal was already expanding into, but it was not the white sandalwood that Timor had. White sandalwood is rarer and thus a more valuable item to sell to buyers in India as well as China. So as colonial powers do, Portugal monopolized the white sandalwood trade and got pretty damn rich off of it. It also pissed off the Dutch, but we don't talk about that here. So the empire started to continuously log down sandalwood trees and send the products to Goa and Macau for trade. Soon enough, the trees dwindled in numbers, approximately reaching half of its original amount. Portugal had to rely on other industries, such as coffee and of course, slaves. Slaves were sent to Macau, women in particular. They would be sold to Portuguese men as partners. What's also significant is the lack of infrastructure to improve lives. During Portugal's rule, they didn't build any schools or hospitals. In fact, they had only built plantations and ports to benefit the empire. Portugal eventually left Timor in 1975, while it lacked any real infrastructure and a strong economy due to colonial neglect. What was left was a vulnerable country next to an abundance of untapped resources. What could possibly go wrong for Timor-Leste? Just 9 days after Timor-Leste declared independence, Indonesia launched a full-scale invasion of the new nation. The reason? Jakarta claimed it was to prevent communism, which actually sounded pretty reasonable at the time. But there were reports that there was a massive reserve of that sweet oil and gas in the Timor Sea. About 200,000 Timorese people had died due to the invasion itself, starvation, and disease. That is about a third of the Timorese population at the time. There's no chance in hell anyone would support a government who would let that happen. Right? Well, remember how I said Indonesia justified its invasion due to the threat of communism? Well, Australia bought into that and fully supported Indonesia's war. In addition to that, Australian Prime Minister Gough Whitlam noted that the division of the island of Timor was due to European colonialism and decided it was fair for Indonesia to take the rest of the island. Whitlam saw colonialism as a European construct, and only European nations could take part in it. Australia's view was that Indonesia was decolonizing Timor-Leste, which may or may not have given Indonesia the motivation to invade. It's complicated, and there's much debate about whether Whitlam's support inspired Indonesia to actually invade Timor-Leste. Basically, Indonesia got away with the death of 200,000 Timorese. To make things worse, Indonesia got Australia to remain hush about the atrocities there by granting them almost all of Timor-Leste's oil reserves, while Timor-Leste was still under occupation. But there is good news. The good news is that Timor-Leste would get independence after Indonesia withdrew its troops. Bad news is that things don't get much better from there. In 2002, Timor-Leste gained independence, but Australia was eyeing something else. Offshore oil and gas. See this? This is the Timor Sea. Australia claimed a crap ton of the area, which obviously pissed off the Timorese. A crap ton, of course, translates to about 60% of the Timor Gap. This claim severely crippled Timor-Leste's ability to rebuild post-independence. Timor-Leste was pressured into signing deals that benefited Australian energy corporations greatly. In order to get ahead of the Timorese, Australia made them sign a bunch of shady deals. Oh, and the Timorese government phones were wiretapped. A massive spy scandal erupted, and Australia, being the beacon of justice that it is, made sure to punish the real criminals. The people who exposed it, obviously. Because apparently stealing resources wasn't enough. Australia needed to make sure that the Timorese weren't talking smack about them as well. So what came out of this series of exploitations? Billions that should have gone into Timor-Leste's economy instead lined the pockets of Australian corporations. However, it is important to note that some Timorese leaders supported deals with Australia, hoping foreign investment could stabilize their economy. While these decisions were controversial, they reflect the complexities of a nation struggling to survive. These deals were made out of desperation and might have been the best choice for Timor-Leste, given their situation at the time as a young and unstable nation. Today, Timor-Leste remains one of Asia's poorest countries, with over 37.4% of the country living below the poverty threshold, and 40% of the population is malnourished. It's a country that never had a golden age thanks to the greed of foreign countries. 90% of its government expenditure is spent on the dwindling oil reserves in the Timor Gap. 80% of its GDP is centered around said industries. Gas resources look stable, but Timor-Leste will still be without one of its main industries, the oil industry. Being resource-rich should be a blessing, but for Timor-Leste it's been a curse, fueling corruption and dependency on foreign powers. From colonialists wielding access to carved sandalwood, to modern states carving out unfair treaties, tools may have changed, but the intent has not. Its wealth became its greatest vulnerability, stolen under the guise of diplomacy and progress. As the oil and gas fade, the question isn't just about how Timor-Leste can survive, but whether the world will ever let it thrive. And this isn't just about Timor-Leste. It's about the uncomfortable truth that the privileges many of us enjoy today are built on the suffering of others. After all, why let a nation prosper when you can strip it bare and call it progress? Maybe the real art of diplomacy is just a game of who can rob the most while looking the most virtuous. Will we finally learn to act before another nation's lifeblood becomes just another line on a corporate ledger?